Welcome back to Horror Drift Stories. Before we step into tonight's story, leave a comment with your location. I always enjoy reading them. If these kinds of calm but unsettling stories are your thing, don't forget to like and subscribe. And just so you know, a few ads might play at the start, but after 10 minutes, it's completely uninterrupted. So, settle in, take a breath, and let's begin. Story 1. I couldn't sleep that night. I tried all the usual things people tell you to do when your brain won't shut up. I turned my pillow over to the cool side. I lay on my back and counted my breaths. I tried to replay something boring in my head, like the steps of my morning routine, hoping it would knock me out. Nothing worked. My mind kept looping the same thoughts, over and over, like a song stuck on the same 10 seconds. Not even one clear thought, either. Just that restless mental noise, where you feel tense for no reason, like you forgot something important, but you don't know what it is. After a while, I gave up on the idea of sleep. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and turned the brightness down low so it wouldn't burn my eyes. The screen lit my room with that pale, cold glow that always makes everything look a little unreal. I told myself I'd just distract my brain for a few minutes, just long enough to get tired again. I opened Facebook. It was almost automatic, like my thumb already knew where to go. I started scrolling through Reels, the endless stream of short videos that don't require any effort. It's one of the easiest ways to shut your mind off, because you don't have to commit to anything. If you don't like a clip, you flick your thumb, and it's gone. At first, it was normal. People dancing in their kitchens, someone doing a prank in a grocery store, a dog wearing a sweater, a weird cooking video with way too much cheese, a guy filming his car while loud music played. Stuff I'd seen 1,000 times in different versions. I kept scrolling until my eyes started to blur, and that was when I saw the first video that felt wrong. It looked low quality. Not just bad lighting low quality, but like it had been downloaded and re-uploaded too many times. The image was blocky and smeared around the edges, like the video couldn't hold its own shape. The colors were off too. There was a faint red tint over everything, like someone had put a dirty filter over the lens, or filmed it through a piece of plastic. A kid was sitting on the floor. That was it. No dancing, no talking, no obvious joke. The kid just sat there, kind of hunched, like they were waiting. The angle was odd, like the phone was placed too low or too far away. I couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl. The kid's hair was dark and messy, and their face wasn't clear enough to read. In the background, I could hear a dog barking, but it didn't sound like a real dog barking. It sounded like one short bark on repeat. The same exact bark, with no difference in tone or distance, like someone had taken a sound effect and looped it badly. Bark, bark, bark. The timing was too perfect, too consistent, like a metronome. That made my skin tighten a little. I don't know why it bothered me so fast, but it did. Maybe because the sound was wrong. Maybe because the kid wasn't doing anything. Maybe because there was no context, no caption that explained what I was looking at. I didn't even watch it for more than a second. I swiped past it right away. A few videos later, it showed up again. Same red tint, same kid sitting on the floor, same weird barking loop. That caught my attention in a way I didn't like. Usually, you don't see the exact same reel twice that quickly, unless the app refreshes or you backtrack. I hadn't done either. My first thought was that the algorithm was glitching and serving me the same video again, because it thought I'd watched it, even though I really hadn't. So I swiped past it again, faster than the first time. I kept scrolling, 2, 3, 4 normal videos. Then the kid video came back. Same clip, same bark loop. A little more irritation rose in me, mixed with discomfort. It felt like a tiny, stupid problem, but it also felt personal, like something was insisting that I pay attention. I scrolled faster. It kept returning. I started noticing the pattern. It wasn't random. It wasn't every once in a while. It was regular, like a bad commercial that keeps popping up between the content you actually want to see. But there was no sponsored label, no account name that stood out, nothing I could block easily. It wasn't just annoying, it was unsettling, because it didn't feel like normal social media repetition. It felt like I was being guided back to the same thing again and again. After the 4th or 5th time, I stopped scrolling and just stared at the video for a second, trying to force my brain to be rational. Maybe the kid video was trending, and Facebook was pushing it hard. Maybe a bunch of accounts reposted it with slight differences, and I wasn't noticing the differences because the quality was so bad. So I looked closely. It wasn't a repost. It was the exact same clip. Same grain, same compression artifacts, same red tint, same shadows, same 3-second loop of barking that never changed. My stomach tightened. I didn't want to give it attention. I didn't want to watch it long enough for Facebook to think I liked it. So I closed the app. I sat on my home screen for a while, just staring at the icons like I was waiting for a feeling to pass. My room was quiet except for a faint hum from outside, maybe traffic or an AC unit, the kind of normal night noise that usually makes you feel grounded. I told myself it was nothing, just a dumb app glitch, just tiredness making me feel jumpy. I hadn't slept well, and when you're exhausted, your brain starts turning small things into threats. To prove to myself I was fine, I opened Instagram. I went straight to Reels again, expecting the usual mix of workout videos and comedians and random clips from people I don't follow. For the first couple of swipes, it was normal. A makeup tutorial, someone filming their cat, a guy giving advice about investing like he was the only person who ever figured it out. Then, after 2 more videos, it appeared. The same kid, the same reddish tint, the same angle. I felt a cold wave move through my chest, like my body reacted before my mind had time to make excuses. And the barking was louder. Not just louder in the sense of the video volume being higher, louder in a way that felt closer, like the sound had moved forward, like it was coming from inside my room, not from a tiny speaker in my hand. I immediately swiped up. The next reel loaded. Then I swiped again. A different video for a moment, and then the kid clip was back. My heart started beating harder. I checked the top of the screen like I was going to see an account name, something I could tap and block. But it flashed by so quickly between swipes that I couldn't catch anything. Every time it appeared, my reflex was to get rid of it. And then I noticed something. It wasn't exactly the same anymore. The kid was closer in the frame. Not by a lot, but enough that I could tell. The camera angle had shifted in, like the phone filming them was now positioned closer to the floor. The kid took up more space on the screen. The barking loop kept going, still that same short bark repeating with no change, but it sounded more distorted now, like the audio was clipping. I scrolled faster, my thumb flicking hard, one video after another, trying to bury the kid clip under normal content. It didn't work. It kept returning, and every time it returned, it was closer. Closer enough that I started feeling trapped, like I wasn't scrolling through random clips anymore, like I was stuck in a hallway where the same door kept appearing in front of me no matter how many turns I took. The barking got louder again. I turned my phone volume down, thinking maybe my thumb had brushed the volume button without me noticing. The volume indicator dropped, but the barking didn't sound quieter. It stayed loud, sharp, and near. That's when panic started trying to crawl up my throat. I tried to close Instagram. Nothing happened. I swiped up from the bottom, the motion to exit the app. Nothing. I tapped the home button area again. Nothing. It was like the screen stopped recognizing my touches, except for one thing: swiping to the next video. So I swiped again, because what else could I do? The kid clip came back immediately. Now the camera was even closer. The kid was still sitting, but their head was angled down more, like they were staring at the floor. Their shoulders looked slumped. Their hands were in their lap, but the video quality was so bad, it was hard to tell what they were doing. The red tint made their skin look wrong. It made everything look like it was lit by emergency lights. The barking loop continued. Bark, bark, bark. Perfectly timed. No breath between barks. No variation. Just the same sound, repeating like a glitch that wouldn't correct itself. I felt my chest tighten like there wasn't enough air in my room. My mouth went dry. I realized I was holding the phone too close to my face, like I was trying to see detail I didn't want to see. I swiped again, different video for a second. Then the kid clip again. Closer. I swiped again. Closer each time it returned. The kid filled more of the screen. The background became less visible. The space around them shrank. It felt like the kid was moving toward me, not on the screen, but through it. The barking became harsher, like it was breaking apart. The sound began to crackle at the edges, like the speaker couldn't handle it. It started to feel less like a bark and more like a repeated digital noise that my brain was translating into barking, because it didn't know what else to call it. I tried to press the power button to turn off the screen. The screen stayed on. I pressed it again, held it down. Nothing. The phone didn't lock. It didn't dim. It didn't even flicker. My hands started to tremble. I could feel my pulse in my fingers. I swiped again, because my body didn't know what else to do. The kid clip appeared, even closer, and the kid's head moved. It didn't move smoothly like a normal person turning their head. It twitched, like a skipped frame, like the motion was stitched together out of missing pieces. The head shifted a few degrees, stopped, shifted again. The kind of motion that makes your brain instantly label it as wrong. My stomach turned. I couldn't look away, and I hated that. I tried to force my eyes to blink, to break the moment, but my attention felt locked in. Slowly, in those jerky, unnatural increments, the kid began turning their head toward me. Not toward the camera. Toward me. That's the only way I can explain the feeling. It wasn't like someone in a video looks into the lens. This felt like the kid's attention was reaching past the lens. The barking kept looping, but now it sounded like it was inside my skull, vibrating in my teeth. The kid's head reached a point where I could see more of their face, still unclear, still smeared by the red tint and low resolution. But I saw enough to feel something cold move through me. The face looked flat, like the shadows didn't sit right. The eyes looked too dark for the lighting, like two deep holes. I whispered, without meaning to, "Stop." The word barely came out. My throat felt tight. The next time the clip came back, it was so close the kid's face nearly filled the entire screen. The red tint made the shapes of their features look like they were carved out of shadow. I could see the outline of a nose, the curve of lips, the dark pits where eyes should be. Then their heads snapped up, fast, sudden, like a trap springing, right at me. The barking stopped instantly. All sound dropped out, so complete it felt like my ears had been plugged. There was a single second of total silence, and that silence felt heavier than any noise. It made my whole body tense, like something was about to happen, and I didn't get to choose whether I would survive it. My phone froze. The screen locked on that frame. The kid's face, close and shadowed, staring. I tried to move, tried to shift the phone away, tried to throw it, but my arms felt stiff, like my muscles had forgotten how to obey. I couldn't even blink properly. My eyes burned, but they stayed open. The kid didn't look like they were looking at the camera anymore. They were looking straight at me. I felt it in my gut with the same certainty you feel when someone stands too close behind you. That prickling awareness that you're being watched, and the watcher is focused and patient. The screen went black, not like the phone powered down, more like the image swallowed itself. Black, flat, and empty. In that blackness, for a fraction of a second, I saw my reflection. My own face, pale in the glow of the screen, eyes wide and scared. And then, this is the part that makes my stomach twist even now, I felt like the reflection wasn't alone, like there was another shape behind my shoulder, just out of view, close enough that if I turned my head I'd feel breath. I jerked upright in bed like I'd been shocked. I woke up so fast I pulled a breath in hard, like I'd been underwater. My room was quiet, normal quiet. No barking, no distortion, no electronic whining, just the faint hum of the building and my own breathing. My phone was next to me, exactly where I always leave it. Completely normal. The screen was off. No video, no frozen frame, no red tint, no sound, nothing. For a long time, I didn't touch it. I just stared at it like it might move on its own. My heart kept racing, and my skin felt clammy. I tried to convince myself it had been a dream. I had been scrolling half asleep. My brain had twisted it. I'd startled myself awake. That would make sense. But the memory didn't feel like a dream memory. It felt like a real sequence of actions. Facebook, close app, Instagram, Reels, the kid clip repeating, the phone not responding, the barking getting louder, the kid getting closer. Dreams usually fall apart when you grab them. This didn't. Eventually, I picked the phone up with 2 fingers like it was dirty. I turned it on and went straight to Instagram, expecting to find the kid clip in my history, or at least something similar. Nothing. My Reels feed looked normal. I checked Facebook. Normal. No repeated clip, no weird audio, no red tint. I checked my volume. Normal. I checked for screen time, for any clue I had actually been on those apps. I checked notifications. Nothing looked strange. When I turned the phone off again, I could see my reflection faintly on the dark screen. Just me. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that if I stared too long, something would show up that wasn't supposed to. I set the phone down and sat there in the dark, feeling stupid and scared at the same time. The part that keeps bothering me, even now, isn't just the fear. It's the familiarity. I don't remember ever seeing that video before. Not once. Not on Facebook. Not on Instagram. Not anywhere. So, I don't know why my brain seemed to know exactly what it looked like. And I don't know why, when the kid's head started turning, a part of me already knew how it would end. Like I wasn't watching something new. Like I was remembering it. Story 2. That was the first thing Jeremy ever said to me. I'd been babysitting the boys for 3 days while their parents were out of town. and until that moment, he hadn't spoken a single word. Not to me, not to his brothers, not even to answer simple yes or no questions. If I asked him if he wanted water, he would just stare. If I asked him if he was tired, he would shrug or blink slowly, like he'd heard me but didn't feel like participating. The other two kept insisting it was normal. Josh, the oldest, had the calm confidence of a kid who already thought of himself as half an adult. He said Jeremy was just shy and that I shouldn't take it personally. Jonathan, the middle one, was more talkative and a little dramatic. He told me Jeremy had always been like that, like it was a story he'd told 100 times to explain his little brother to people. Sweet kid, Jonathan said, as if he were defending him. He's polite. He just doesn't talk to new people. But 3 full days of silence didn't feel like shyness. Shyness still has cracks in it. A shy kid might whisper a word when they forget to be careful, or answer when they get excited, or laugh at something without meaning to. Jeremy didn't do any of that. He moved around the house like he was trying not to be seen. When he did look at me, it was direct and steady, not nervous. It wasn't the look of someone scared of attention. It was more like the look of someone watching to see what you'd do. There were 3 of them, each about 3 years apart. Josh was the oldest, then Jeremy. Jeremy was 8, almost 9. Small for his age, thin wrists, a face that could look innocent and serious in the same second. He had dark hair that fell into his eyes, and a habit of standing still for just a little too long, like he'd paused in the middle of being a normal kid and forgot to press play again. When their parents hired me, they made it sound simple. A long weekend trip, check in once a day, keep them fed, make sure they do homework, lights out at a reasonable hour. They were polite, stressed in that typical parent way, and they gave me a long list of numbers to call if something went wrong. The first couple of days really were easy, almost too easy. No arguing, no meltdowns, no "I hate vegetables" battles. Josh helped clear plates without being asked. Jonathan actually did his homework and didn't try to negotiate. Jeremy ate quietly and disappeared upstairs when it was time to brush teeth. Every night, they went to bed without a fight. It should have felt like a win. Instead, it felt off, like the house was cooperating too well. Babysitting, at least in my experience, is never that smooth. Even good kids test you. Even calm houses have moments where you hear a crash, and you run to find out someone tried to climb something they shouldn't. But this house stayed quiet and controlled, like someone had trained it to behave. That evening, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. The dishwasher was humming softly. The sink water ran in a steady stream, and I was half listening to the sound because it helped keep my brain relaxed. Upstairs, I'd heard the boys moving around, getting ready for bed. Josh had been reminding Jonathan to brush his teeth, and Jonathan had complained the way kids always complain, more out of habit than real resistance. Jeremy hadn't said anything at all, but I'd heard his light footsteps in the hallway and the quiet click of his bedroom door. I thought I was alone downstairs. Then, I got the feeling that someone was behind me, the way you sometimes feel it without hearing anything. I turned, expecting maybe Josh had come down to ask a question. Jeremy was standing in the kitchen doorway. I hadn't heard him walk down the stairs. I hadn't heard him cross the hallway. He was just there, barefoot, hands hanging at his sides, watching me like he'd been there the entire time. And I was the one who was late. For a moment I didn't speak, because something about the way he stood made my own body go still. It wasn't threatening, but it made me alert, like a sudden change in temperature. "Hey," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice normal and warm. "You okay? You need something?" He didn't blink. He didn't look away. And then, in that quiet, careful voice, like he was choosing each word and holding it between his teeth before letting it out, he spoke. Have you ever played 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak? It was so unexpected I almost laughed. Not in a mean way, more out of surprise and relief, because after 3 days of silence, any words at all felt like progress. I let out a small, nervous chuckle. No, I said. I've never heard of it. Is it fun? His face changed instantly, like a light switching on. He smiled wide and sudden, like he'd been waiting for me to say that exact line. The smile was too big for his small face, stretching his cheeks, showing teeth that looked a little too perfect in the kitchen light. Yes, he said, I love this game. He looked so pleased with himself that I felt the urge to ask, even though part of me wanted to end the conversation and send him back upstairs. How do you play? I asked. We have to go outside first, he said. Then I will tell you the rules. I glanced at the clock. It was already late. The older boys were upstairs and the house was settling into that nighttime quiet. I didn't like the idea of going outside with him in the dark, even if it was just the backyard. It wasn't about danger from the yard itself. It was about routine. Bedtime was bedtime. It's too late to go outside, I told him gently. You need to go to bed. For a moment, he didn't react. He just stood there with that same small smile, looking at me like he was deciding what to do next. Then he said, please. He didn't whine. He didn't drag the word out. He didn't stomp his foot. He just said it, soft and flat. I shook my head. Not tonight. He didn't argue. He just said it again. Quieter. Please. Then again, please. 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 Each please sounded thinner than the last, like the words were being pulled out of him, like something inside him was tugging at them. I hesitated, and I hated myself for hesitating. I should have said no, but something about him finally speaking, after 3 days, made it feel cruel to shut him down immediately. It also made me curious in a way I didn't like admitting. What kind of game needed those specific items? Why did he say it like it was a formal name? Is it quick? I asked, trying to find a compromise. Yes, he said immediately, like he'd been waiting for that opening. I exhaled. Fine. But after that, you go straight to bed. No arguing, okay? He nodded once, sharp and certain, then turned and ran down the hall. Jeremy, slow down, I called, following him. At least put on shoes. He didn't answer. He didn't slow. By the time I reached the back door, he was already outside, barefoot, standing in the middle of the yard, perfectly still. The porch light flickered as I stepped out behind him, and I remembered noticing it because it hadn't flickered before. The light buzzed faintly, the kind of buzz you usually ignore, but in that moment it felt loud. It threw a pale circle over the porch steps and the nearest patch of grass. The yard beyond the circle looked darker than it should have. The trees at the back made a jagged line against the night sky. I could smell damp soil and the faint sweetness of cut grass, and underneath that, something older, like wet leaves decomposing. A strange stillness settled over everything. No wind, no insects, no distant cars, nothing but the sound of my own breathing, louder than it should have been. Jeremy didn't move. He didn't look at me for permission. He just waited, as if the game had already started, and I was the one who was behind. So, I said, forcing a light tone that didn't match how tight my chest felt. You said you'd explain the rules. He nodded once. You have to find 3 leaves, he said. They have to be different. I looked down at the ground. Leaves were everywhere. That part seemed harmless. There were always leaves in this yard, even in seasons when you wouldn't expect them, caught in corners and along fence lines. And 2 branches, he continued. But you can't break them. They have to already be on the ground. That makes sense, I said, even though I didn't know why it mattered. Anything else? He paused, then brightened slightly, like he was pleased he remembered the next part. Every time you pick something up, you have to say what you have. Out loud? I asked. Yes. I waited for him to explain why, but he didn't. He just watched me. His eyes weren't wide like a kid excited to play. They were steady, focused on my hands, like he was measuring what I did. And the beak? I asked because the name of the game wouldn't let me ignore that part. You get that last, he said, at the edge. He pointed toward the back of the yard, where the grass thinned into dirt and low brush, then gave way to a line of trees. The yard didn't end with a fence. It ended with woods, messy and uneven, the kind that look harmless in daylight and like a different world at night. There's really going to be a beak out there? I asked, half joking, half not. Yes. From what? Hunters leave them, he said. The answer came too quickly, like something memorized. It didn't sound like a child thinking. It sounded like a child repeating a line that worked. I almost pressed him on it, because hunters leaving beaks didn't make sense. Hunters don't take beaks and drop them behind someone's yard. But something about his face made me decide it wouldn't go anywhere useful. All right, I said. I'll go first. He nodded. I stepped away from him and scanned the ground until I found a leaf that looked distinct. It was narrow and pale, with a jagged edge. I bent down, picked it up, and straightened, turning it in my fingers. 1 leaf, I said. Jeremy nodded, eyes fixed on my hand. I moved a little farther and found another leaf, wider and darker, edges curled inward, like it had dried that way. I picked it up and added it to the first. 2 leaves, I said. He nodded again, not smiling now, just watching. By the time I found the 3rd leaf, I was already aware of how strange it felt to stand in the yard at night, speaking into emptiness, like I was reciting something. The 3rd leaf was small, almost round, with a glossy surface that caught the porch light when I lifted it. 3 leaves, I said. Jeremy gave the same small nod, slow and deliberate. His gaze didn't shift. He watched like he was waiting for me to make a mistake. Now branches, he said. I turned toward a tree and spotted a thin, dry branch near the base, lying in the grass like it had fallen days ago. I picked it up without thinking. 1 branch, I said. Jeremy tilted his head slightly. All of it, he said. I frowned. All of it? He nodded once, impatient now. I adjusted my grip and tried again, forcing a small smile like this was normal. 3 leaves, 1 branch. That seemed to satisfy him. The tension in his shoulders eased a fraction, like he'd been holding it until I said the right thing. I walked farther and found another branch, smaller, half hidden by grass. I picked it up and spoke quickly. 3 leaves, 2 branches. Jeremy nodded again, but slower this time, as if confirming something to himself, rather than to me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet felt thicker than before, almost pressurized. I noticed my own breathing again, how loud it sounded in my ears, and I didn't like that. It made me feel like if anything else breathed out there, I would hear it. Then Jeremy looked toward the woods. Now the beak, he said. I followed his gaze. The edge of the yard didn't feel like a boundary anymore. It felt like an invitation. "You're really telling me there's going to be one just lying there?" I asked. "Yes." I shifted the leaves and branches in my hands and hesitated. "Come with me," I said. He shook his head. "What? Why not?" "You have to get it," he said, like that was obvious. "Can we not go together?" "I'm watching," he replied. That wasn't an answer. Not really. But it was the only one he gave. He stayed where he was, barefoot in the grass, still as a marker. I started toward the back of the yard. The ground changed under my feet, grass thinning into dirt patches and exposed roots. The air felt heavier there, like the warmth and safety from the house didn't reach this part of the property. It was quiet in a way that made me notice what was missing. No insects, no wind in the leaves, no movement, just stillness. I slowed down when I reached the first line of trees. And then I saw it. A few feet ahead, lying in the dirt, was a beak. It was small and pale, the shape instantly recognizable, even before my brain accepted it. Not a whole skull, not bones. Just a beak, clean and intact, like it had been removed carefully and placed there. I stopped and stared, trying to make sense of it. There were no feathers nearby, no blood, no sign of any animal. It looked wrong in its neatness, wrong in how clearly it sat on the dirt like it had been set down on purpose. I glanced around, expecting to see something else. Bones, a body, anything. There was nothing. Just the beak. "Jeremy," I called, not taking my eyes off it. "There actually is one here." "I told you," he said. His voice was closer than I expected. My skin prickled. I turned slightly and saw him a few steps behind me. I hadn't heard him walk. I hadn't heard the grass shift under his feet. He was just there, as if he'd stepped out of the darkness rather than cross distance. I looked back down at the beak and crouched. When I picked it up, it felt lighter than I expected, smooth and cold. It didn't crumble. It didn't feel old. It felt preserved. For a moment I just held it, frozen, forgetting the game entirely. Then I remembered his rule. 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak, I said. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet, like it didn't belong outside at night. I started to rise and turn back toward the yard. "Okay, that is everything." "Say it again." I froze. Jeremy's voice was right behind me now, closer than before. I turned. He was staring at what I held, not at my face. His expression had flattened. The excitement was gone. It looked like focus now. Expectation. "All of it," he said. I swallowed, throat suddenly dry. 3 leaves, I said. 2 branches, 1 beak. He nodded slightly, but it wasn't enough. Something in him stayed unsatisfied, like a latch that didn't click. "Again," he said. I stared at him. "Why?" "You have to say it 3 times. His voice was flat, like he was reciting a rule he didn't invent, but had to obey. I looked down at the beak, then back at him. My instincts were telling me to stop, to drop it, to walk back to the house, to pick up Jeremy and carry him inside if I had to. Instead, because I didn't want to scare him, because I wanted to end this cleanly and go back to normal, I did what he asked. 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak, I said quietly. Jeremy smiled again, sudden and bright, like the first time in the kitchen. It was like the smile wasn't for me. It was for the fact that I had done it correctly. "Perfect," he said. "Now, one last thing." He turned and ran back toward the middle of the yard, stopping in the spot where he'd been standing earlier. "Place them here," he said, almost bouncing in place. My hands felt stiff, but I followed. I walked back and knelt, setting the leaves, the branches, and the beak down where he pointed. The moment they touched the grass, Jeremy crouched beside them like he'd been waiting for this part the entire time. He moved quickly and carefully, not like a kid playing at random, but like someone assembling something they had practiced. He placed the two branches first, one flat, one angled against it. Then he set the beak at one end and laid the leaves along the branches, spacing them evenly, adjusting them with small, precise movements. I watched him, confused and increasingly uneasy. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't look up. "A raven," he said. I frowned. "How do you know what a raven is?" "There aren't any around here. The cats scared them off years ago." He shifted one leaf slightly, then finally lifted his eyes to mine. "That's just a story," he said. For a second he smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes stayed fixed and dark, like he was looking through me to check something behind me. "They're still here," he added. He glanced past me, toward the edge of the woods, watching. At the time, I told myself it was just something he said to scare me, the way kids do when they want to feel powerful. I almost told him to stop, that it wasn't funny. I almost told him we were going inside right now. But before I could speak, something moved. It was small enough that I might have missed it if I hadn't been staring directly at the shape he'd made. One of the leaves shifted, not the way a leaf shifts when a breeze hits it. There was no breeze. I could feel the air sitting heavy against my skin. This movement was slower, more deliberate. The leaf lifted slightly, just enough to break the shape, then settled back into place. My whole body went cold. I stared at it, waiting for it to happen again, trying to convince myself my eyes had played a trick on me. Maybe my hand had bumped the ground when I stepped back. Maybe Jeremy had touched it, and I didn't see. Maybe the leaf was curling from dryness and moved on its own. But the shape was still. The yard was still. Jeremy was still. Then I looked at him. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't even looking at the leaves like a kid proud of his work. His eyes were fixed just past the shape, like he was waiting for something else. Something that wasn't on the ground yet. "Did you see that?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He didn't answer. He just smiled again. But it was different now. Not excited, not playful, quiet, satisfied. Like this was the part he cared about most. I looked back down. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, one of the branches shifted. It was slight, just enough to change the angle. But it was enough. The shape no longer looked like something we'd arranged with our hands. It looked like something that was holding itself together. Like the branches had found their own balance. The leaves had found their own placement. It wasn't a big movement. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse than that. It was subtle, real, quiet. That's when I stepped back. I told Jeremy it was enough, that the game was over, that it was too late, and we were going inside right now. My voice came out firmer than I expected, like my body was using my mouth to protect itself. This time, he didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just nodded once, as if he'd known the game would end exactly like this. I didn't look back at the shape again. I walked him inside, closed the door, and locked it. The lock clicking into place sounded louder than it should have. I guided him upstairs and made sure he went into his room. He didn't fight. He didn't linger. He moved like a kid who had done his part, and didn't need anything from me anymore. Now I'm writing this about an hour later, sitting in the living room with every light on. I keep trying to tell myself it was nothing, that I imagined it, that it's late and I'm tired, and my brain is turning a child's weird game into something creepy. But I haven't gone back outside to check, and I don't think I will. Something is making sounds outside, a slow, deliberate pecking. Not on the door, not on the walls, somewhere else, just out of sight. Like whatever it is doesn't need to force its way in. Like it's already close enough to let me hear it. And that's the point. Story 3. Let me start by saying I've always had low iron, and I've been prone to nosebleeds for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, it happened constantly, almost every day. Sometimes it would start from nothing. Laughing too hard, running outside in the heat, waking up in the middle of the night with that warm, wet feeling under my nose. Back then, my mom kept tissues everywhere, and my teachers knew to hand me a pass to the bathroom without asking questions. As I got older, it stopped being an everyday thing. It still happened, but not often. Maybe once every couple of months, sometimes less. I figured my body finally got its act together. Or maybe I just stopped doing the things that triggered it so much. Either way, it became something I barely thought about. Until the other day. I'm not going to pretend I've lived some clean, perfect life. I haven't. It's been rough in ways I don't even like talking about. And no, that isn't an excuse for what I do. It's just the truth. I've used drugs. I still do sometimes. I'm not proud of it, but I'm also not going to lie about it to make myself sound better. I've snorted things here and there. Not constantly, not every day, but enough that I know it's stupid and that it's not helping my nose situation at all. My friend Leo and I usually did that stuff together. We've been friends long enough that we've seen each other at our worst and just kept going anyway. He's one of those people who always shows up with some new idea, some new, this will make everything feel better solution. Sometimes that solution is a bottle, sometimes it's a pill, sometimes it's a baggie of something he swears is the cleanest he's ever seen. So when he came over with a new drug, I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was that I'd never heard of it before. It was late. I was in my room, trying to pretend I was going to do something productive, even though I'd been sitting there staring at the same screen for 20 minutes. My window was cracked open because the room smelled stale, and outside the night felt thick and humid, the kind of air that clings to your skin. I heard Leo before I saw him. A scrape, a grunt, then the sound of him trying to climb through my window like it was the normal way to enter a house. XTC 397, he said, sounding breathless and excited, like he was announcing the name of a new video game. He nearly lost his balance, one leg still outside, hands gripping the sill. I stared at him. Dude, you're not even through the window yet. Are you really that excited over some new drug? He laughed, but it came out weird and sloppy, like he'd already been drinking or doing something else. Kevin, he started, then blinked at me like his brain had to reload. Wyatt, whatever. You've never had something like this before, man. The high is apparently out of this world. I rolled my eyes. It sounds like your dealer just wanted to rip you off because he realized what a gullible dumbass he was dealing with. Leo finally got both feet inside, stumbling forward and catching himself on my desk. Nah, man. People are talking about it. Down at the corners. Like all the time. People asking for it and them saying they don't got it. I'm surprised I actually found it. He dug into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag. He held it up like a trophy. Even in the dim light of my room, it looked wrong. Bright. Too bright. The stuff inside wasn't white or off-white like most powders I'd seen. It was yellow, not pale yellow, not beige, bright yellow, almost neon, like powdered candy. My stomach did that slow twist it does when I know I'm about to do something I shouldn't. Leo poured the bag out onto my desk without asking. The powder spread in a thin pile, catching the light like it had a faint shimmer. He started messing with it like he'd done it 100 times, cutting it into lines with his phone like that was normal, like my desk wasn't where I ate sometimes, where I put my hands, where I kept my books. "Dude," he said, eyes wide, "you've got to try this with me." I leaned back in my chair. You know I don't like snorting, man. My nose is already messed up. I get nosebleeds. Like for real. He waved a hand like I was being dramatic. Come on. It's supposed to be the best shit ever. You aren't even a little curious? I am, I admitted, because I was. That bright yellow looked strange, and strange things always get into your head. But can't we smoke it or something? The guy said we gotta snort it for the full effect. That should have been my moment to stop. That should have been the moment my brain said, wow, the dealer is giving specific instructions like this is some weird ritual. Maybe that's a sign. Instead, I looked at the powder again and felt that familiar mix of boredom and self-destruction. That feeling of wanting something to cut through the dullness of my life, even if it hurt me. All right, I said, and even as I said it, I hated myself. Fine. Give it here. I'm not going to describe anything in a way that makes it sound like a how-to, because it shouldn't be. I did it. It was stupid. I did a line and leaned back, waiting for that usual wave of something, anything. Euphoria, warmth, that floating feeling people chase. Leo was watching me like a kid waiting for fireworks. How is it? He asked. Is it as good as they're saying? A few seconds passed, then a little more. Nothing. I blinked, confused. Dude, I'm not feeling anything. His face tightened. What? Here, let me try. He did it too, and then we just sat there, waiting, like idiots. I kept expecting it to hit late, like maybe it needed time. But minutes went by, and it felt like we had snorted nothing at all. Leo slammed his hand on my desk. God damn it, he scammed me. I snorted, even though my nose already felt irritated. Told you, dumbass. So what the hell did we just snort? He stared at the yellow dust still on the desk. Probably Kool-Aid or some shit. It didn't taste like Kool-Aid, I said automatically. Dude, Leo said, and his voice changed. It went from angry to alarmed in 1 second. Your nose. I touched under my nostrils without thinking, and my fingers came away wet. Shit, I said. Blood started trickling down, slow at first. I rubbed at it, and it just smeared. That familiar annoyance hit me, because nosebleeds were always inconvenient, always messy. Great, I muttered, trying to sound calm. I snorted some mystery powder, didn't even get high, but I got a nosebleed. I walked quickly to the bathroom, leaning over the sink. At first, it looked like a normal bleed. Steady, annoying, but manageable. I grabbed toilet paper and rolled up 2 small balls, stuffed them into my nostrils. It hurt. The paper immediately started soaking red. This one's bad, I said under my breath, switching out the paper when it got too wet. I could hear Leo in my room mumbling to himself, pacing. What are you yapping about in there? I yelled. He came to the bathroom doorway and stood there, not coming in all the way, like he didn't want to get close. I'm pissed, man, he said. You don't even know. Damn, that's a bad bloody nose, huh? The toilet paper I'd just put in was already drenched. Then the blood surged, like a sudden push from inside my face. The paper got shoved out of the way, and blood spilled straight into the sink. It wasn't a trickle anymore. It was a pour. My stomach dropped. Jesus, I whispered. Leo stepped closer, and I heard genuine fear in his voice. Dude, that's a lot. It got worse in seconds. Both nostrils. The sink turned red. My hands turned slick. I tried to jam more toilet paper in there, but it wouldn't hold. The pressure just pushed it out. It was like trying to block a broken pipe with your fingers. Call an ambulance, I said, and even then part of my brain didn't believe I was saying it. I'd never called an ambulance for a nosebleed in my life. Call an ambulance, man. It's never bled like this before. Leo bolted down the stairs. I heard him fumbling with the landline in the kitchen. I grabbed a towel and pressed it hard under my nose, but it soaked through almost immediately. Blood ran down my chin, my neck, into my shirt. My white t-shirt started turning dark and heavy, sticking to my skin. I felt weirdly calm for a second, like my brain couldn't process what was happening. Then panic hit like a wave, and my hands started shaking. Leo ran back upstairs. Okay, he said, breathless. I called. They're coming. God, dude, it's so much worse than when I left. That sentence stuck with me. So much worse. Like the bleeding was alive. Like it was speeding up, as if it had somewhere to go. The ambulance took forever. It might have only been 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. I stood in the bathroom, over the sink, and the whole room started to look like a crime scene. Blood on the faucet, blood on the counter, blood dripping onto the floor, splashing in little dots when it hit the tile. I kept pressing the towel and switching to a new one when it got soaked. But it didn't matter. When the paramedics arrived, everything moved fast. Bright lights. Voices talking over each other. Someone asking me to sit down. Someone else asking me what I took. And Leo explaining in a rush, while sounding like he wanted to throw up. They wrapped something heavy around my nose and face. Not just a little gauze. A thick bandage meant to apply pressure. They tipped my head forward, told me not to lean back, told me to breathe slowly. Their hands were moving quickly, but I could feel their nervousness underneath their professionalism. In the ambulance, one of them kept glancing at the bandage and then at the floor, where blood was still dripping. I heard one of them curse under his breath. Not loud enough for a patient to officially hear, but I heard it. They asked me again what I took. I told them it was something new, a name with numbers and letters, and I couldn't remember it right away because my brain felt fuzzy and my mouth tasted like iron. Then Leo's earlier voice came back in my head and I forced the name out. XTC397, I said. One of the paramedics paused. Not a dramatic pause, just a small hesitation, like his body reacted before his mind decided what to do. XTC397, he repeated. Yeah, I said. I think that's it. He looked at his partner, and they exchanged a glance that made my stomach twist harder than the bleeding did. It wasn't a look of surprise. It was recognition. The other paramedic, the one closer to the radio, leaned in and said something quietly into it. He kept his voice low, turned slightly away from me, like he didn't want me to hear. I caught only fragments, not words, just tone, urgency, like he was reporting something he didn't want to say out loud. I wanted to ask what was going on, but another wave of warm blood slid past the bandage, and I swallowed my question along with the metallic taste in my mouth. When we got to the hospital, It became chaos. Bright white hallways, nurses moving fast, a doctor pulling back the bandage and immediately swearing, then trying to keep his face calm, like he remembered I was a patient and not a problem he could just curse at. Someone wheeled me into a room. Someone else tried to shine a light up my nostrils. It hurt. They asked me questions I couldn't answer properly. How long has it been bleeding? Any head injury? Any blood disorders? Any medications? Any recent drug use? I kept telling them, low iron, nosebleeds my whole life. Yes, I snorted something. No, I don't know what it really was, besides the name Leo said. They tried to clean the blood off me at first, but it was pointless. Every time they wiped a surface, more came, like the bleeding was mocking their effort. Eventually, they stopped cleaning and focused on trying to stop it, but nothing they did seemed to slow it down. They stuffed things in my nose. They put pressure. They used tools and lights and things I didn't recognize. They changed out soaked pads. They tried again. After a while, the energy shifted. They stopped moving with confidence and started moving with frustration. The doctor's voice got quieter. The nurses stopped making casual reassurances. A different doctor came in, looked, and left again. Someone muttered about calling ENT. Someone else muttered about labs. I lay there on the bed, covered in dried blood from head to toe. And the worst part was that I didn't feel the way you're supposed to feel. I should have been dizzy. I should have been lightheaded. I should have been fading in and out. I should have felt weak and cold. I didn't. I felt fine. Not good, but fine. Like my body was ignoring what was clearly happening. At some point, Leo was allowed back in for a moment. He looked pale, like he'd been crying or close to it. He handed me my laptop and said, "I brought this so you have something," like he didn't know what else to do. I don't think he expected me to actually use it. The doctors eventually left me alone for a while, probably because they needed to talk, or because they didn't have anything left to try right then. They bandaged me again, but it wasn't stopping. The blood kept finding its way out. It seeped past the padding, down my face, onto my neck, onto the sheets, slow at times, then suddenly heavier again. And the whole time my body stayed steady, no faintness, no blurred vision. No feeling like I was about to pass out. It made no sense. That's the worst part. I've bled before. I know how my body reacts. Even a normal nosebleed can leave you shaky and exhausted. This wasn't normal. This felt like gallons. I know that sounds exaggerated, but I'm looking at the sheets, the floor, the trash bags of soaked gauze, the way the nurses have stopped trying to keep up with the mess. I can see it. I can smell it. It's everywhere. And I'm still sitting here typing. The blood has gotten on my keyboard. It's caked between the keys. My hands are sticky. The screen has smears on it. I can barely see the letters anymore. I'm mostly typing from memory and guessing. It feels ridiculous. Like I'm writing a message from inside a situation that shouldn't exist. But I'm writing it anyway because I don't think the doctors know what to do. They're trying, but I can see it in their faces when they think I'm not watching. I can hear it in the way they avoid promising anything. So if anyone reading this has ever heard of XTC 397, if anyone has any idea what it actually is, what it does, what it's supposed to do to someone's body, please tell me, because the paramedics recognized the name. They did. I saw it, and they radioed something the moment I said it. I don't know what that means, but it scares me more than the blood does. And if I survive this, if I walk out of here alive, I swear I'm done. No more dabbling. No more just once. No more trusting a friend who climbs through my window with bright yellow powder like it's a joke. I don't want this life anymore. Right now, I just want the bleeding to stop. Story 4. The police sirens were loud enough to wake the whole neighborhood. I heard them before I even opened my eyes. That layered wail bouncing off the houses and getting closer every second. At first I thought it was an accident on the main road, something happening far away, that we'd only hear for a moment. But the sound didn't pass. It gathered, multiplied, and then stopped somewhere nearby, leaving that sharp after noise in the air. By the time I stepped into the hallway, my mom and dad were already up. The lights were on downstairs, and I could hear my dad's voice, low and tense, the way he spoke when something wasn't right. My sister appeared behind me, rubbing her eyes, still half asleep. We went outside together, pulled along by the same thing that pulled everyone else. Nearly every neighbor was doing it too. Doors opening up and down the street. People in robes and pajama pants stepping out onto their porches. Nobody was talking much. We all just followed the sound down the sidewalk, toward the flashing red and blue lights that lit the early morning like a broken carnival. As we got closer, my stomach tightened, because I recognized exactly where all the police cars were parked. Everything was happening in front of the Dreadmore house. That house had been abandoned for as long as I could remember, the kind of place kids point at from a distance and pretend they're not scared. Boarded windows, a sagging porch, dark stains on the siding from years of rain. Even in daylight it looked wrong, like it didn't belong in a normal neighborhood. People said it was haunted. People said a family had lived there once and disappeared. People said stupid things, like the house hated visitors. Mostly it was just a decaying building nobody wanted to spend money demolishing. A rotten tooth at the end of Wicked Lane. Crime scene tape stretched across the yard, bright and clean against the dead grass. Officers moved in and out, their flashlights still on even though dawn was creeping up. An older detective stood near the porch, arms crossed, watching everyone like he wanted the whole neighborhood to vanish so he could work. Nobody spoke. Even the people who always had something to say kept their mouths shut. Then the front door opened. A stretcher rolled out, pushed by 2 paramedics. On top of it was a body bag strapped down tight. Something in the way it was strapped, something too careful, made my skin go cold. Someone gasped, nearby. I felt my mom's hand clamp down hard on my shoulder, like she was anchoring me in place. That was enough for my parents. My dad didn't wait for explanations, didn't wait for gossip. He turned us around and started walking us back toward our house, like he could physically steer us away from whatever was happening. My mom kept her hand on my shoulder the whole way, and my sister stayed close, quiet, unusually quiet. I didn't sleep after that. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint, distant sounds of radios and car doors and voices outside, wondering what could have happened in that house. My mind kept trying to fill in pictures. A homeless person, a drug den, a fight, a suicide, something ordinary and awful, something that would fit in a world where the Dreadmore house was just an abandoned building. But the image that kept pushing its way back into my head wasn't ordinary. It was the body bag being rolled out like it belonged there. The next morning, I went through my routine like I always did. Shower, cereal, backpack, shoes. I kept expecting my parents to bring it up, to explain what they'd heard from neighbors, but they didn't. My dad read the news on his phone like nothing happened. My mom fussed with lunch and told us not to be late. At the bus stop, everything felt too normal. Birds in the trees, the air already warm, Kids talking about homework and games. It made last night feel like something I'd dreamed. Then I heard my name being shouted. I turned and saw my best friend Joshua running toward me, and Damon right behind him. They were both out of breath, like they'd sprinted the whole way, and they were talking over each other so fast it sounded like noise instead of words. "Slow down," I told them. "What are you guys doing?" Joshua bent forward with his hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Damon's face was pale and excited at the same time. Joshua finally blurted it out. "Nick's dad is dead." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to smirk and say he was messing with me. He didn't. "What?" I said. "Say that again?" He did, louder, like volume could make it more real. "Nick's dad is dead." Damon jumped in, words tumbling out. Someone had called the police the night before about screams coming from the Dreadmore house. Nick's dad was a cop. He'd been on patrol already, and when dispatch sent someone to check the house, he went in. "People are saying he just dropped," Damon said. "Like he walked in and then he was dead. No fight, no struggle, no nothing." That didn't sound real either. People don't just collapse and die for no reason, especially not someone trained and armed. But rumor spreads faster than facts, and by the time Damon finished talking, my stomach had already decided to be scared. The bus pulled up before we could say anything else. The doors opened with their usual hiss, and we stepped on like kids do, pretending we were calm even though our heads were full. The first thing we noticed was that Nick wasn't there. Nick always sat near the back with his headphones. He was the type who didn't talk much at school, but still felt like part of the group. Quiet, but not weird. He and Joshua had played baseball together. Damon had known him since elementary school. Nick's dad, being a cop, was one of those facts that made Nick feel untouchable in a small-town way, like trouble wouldn't stick to him. But Nick wasn't on the bus. He wasn't at school either. Days passed, then more days, and people started whispering about Nick, like he had become a story instead of a person. Teachers didn't say much, but you could see it in the way they glanced at empty seats. Some kids joked about it, because kids sometimes joke when they're scared. Most people just acted like it was sad and distant, like it couldn't happen to them. Then the missing person flyers showed up. Nick's face stapled to light poles. Nick's face on the wall of the strip mall by the grocery store. The same photo everywhere. Him smiling like he didn't know he was about to become a question nobody could answer. I saw Nick's mom out there almost every day, walking with a stack of flyers and a staple gun. Sometimes she had a friend with her. Sometimes she was alone. She looked smaller each week, like something was draining her from the inside. Police cars started stopping by her house regularly. Once, I heard my mom telling my dad that Nick's mom had started showing up to work, drunk, and getting sent home early. My dad made a noise like he felt sorry for her, but also like he wanted the topic to be done. Then came the night that started it all for me. The night that took the whole thing from tragic to wrong. I couldn't sleep, not because I was thinking about Nick exactly, but because my head felt packed with too much information and no answers. I got out of bed and pulled my telescope toward my window, something I'd done 100 times. I liked looking at the moon and the brighter stars. It gave me a feeling of distance, like the world was bigger than whatever was happening in my street. I aimed the telescope at the sky automatically, but when I opened the curtains, I noticed movement outside. My street was usually dead quiet at that hour. A few porch lights, the occasional car, nothing else. So movement caught my attention fast. I adjusted the telescope downward and looked. My chest tightened. It was Nick's mom. She was walking slowly down the street, like she wasn't fully awake, like she was moving on instinct rather than choice. Her arms hung at her sides. Her hair looked messy, unbrushed. She wasn't carrying flyers. She wasn't on her way to work. I followed her with the telescope as she moved down the block. She was heading straight toward Wicked Lane, straight toward the Dreadmore house. At first I told myself she was just checking the house, that maybe she was desperate and doing something risky, like searching places the police had already searched. Grief makes people do strange things. I watched her reach the porch and lift her hand toward the doorknob. Then she stopped. Everything held still, like someone had pressed pause on the night. And then her head turned slowly, too slowly. Not a normal turn. Not a quick glance. A slow, smooth rotation that made my throat tighten. She turned until her face was aimed directly at my window. I stopped breathing without meaning to. I adjusted the focus, hands shaking, and her face filled the lens. Her skin was pale, but not pale like someone who hadn't slept. Pale like a body, stretched tight, as if all the blood had been pulled out of it. Her eyes were the worst part. They looked sunken deep into her face, and they were completely black, not dark brown, not shadowed, black like empty holes. They didn't reflect any porch light. They didn't catch any shine. She stared straight at me with her mouth slightly open, like she was trying to remember how words work. I dropped the telescope and stumbled backward. A scream tore out of me before I could control it. My parents came rushing in. My mom flipped on the light and my dad stood in the doorway, already irritated, already looking like he wanted the problem to be simple. "What's going on?" my mom asked. "Why are you screaming?" I tried to explain, shaking, words tripping over each other. The telescope, the street, Nick's mom, her face, the way she looked right at me. My dad sighed before I even finished. "You were half asleep," he said. "You probably dreamed it." I wasn't asleep. I snapped. I was wide awake. I saw her. My mom exchanged a look with him, the kind of look parents share when they've decided you're having a moment and they need to calm you down. "You've been hearing scary things lately," she said gently. "With Nick and his dad, your mind is filling in gaps." "I know what I saw," I said, my voice cracking. "That's enough," my dad said. "Go back to bed." They turned the light off and left. The click of my door closing behind them felt final, like the conversation was over whether I accepted it or not. I lay there in the dark, wishing I'd never opened the curtains, wishing I'd never pointed the telescope at the street. Part of me wanted to get up and look again, to prove it, to catch her still standing there. But I couldn't move. I didn't want to see those eyes again, even through glass. The next day I went to Joshua's house and told him and Damon everything. We sat on the floor in his room, with the door shut, like we were planning something illegal. Damon laughed when I finished, not because it was funny, but because he didn't know what else to do with it. "So you're saying she turned into a ghost now?" he said. "Come on." "She didn't look normal," I insisted. "I'm telling you, something's wrong." Joshua didn't laugh. He just sat there staring at the carpet, jaw tight. Joshua knew me too well to think I'd invent something like that for attention. Damon rolled his eyes and said, "Maybe we should go investigate ourselves." "No," Joshua and I said at the same time. Later that day, we walked the neighborhood and saw police cars parked in front of Nick's mom's house. Damon, being Damon, walked right up to one of the officers and asked what was going on. The cop brushed him off immediately. Just a hard look and a short answer that meant, "Go away." As we walked away, we heard another officer say, "Her coworkers say she didn't show up this morning." I stopped walking. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I turned to Joshua and Damon and said, "Quieter now. I told you." We ran back to Joshua's house and talked it over again. But now the pieces felt like they were snapping together in a way I didn't like. Nick missing. His dad dying inside the Dreadmore house. Now his mom missing too. And me seeing her walking toward that place in the middle of the night, like she was being pulled. "If she went there," Joshua said slowly, "and Nick went there, then maybe that's where they are." Damon said we should tell our parents. For once, he sounded serious. So we did. We told Joshua's parents first, then mine. They asked questions, but none of them sounded truly worried. More confused, more annoyed, like this was kids spinning a scary story because we'd overheard adult talk. My parents cared more that I'd been awake late than anything else. That night, lying awake in Joshua's room, I finally said what I'd been thinking all day. "No one's going to help," I said. "If Nick's still alive, he needs us. You're talking about going inside that house." "I know," I said. "I don't want to. But we can't just do nothing." Damon stared at the wall, jaw clenched. He didn't look excited anymore. He looked like he was trying to decide whether fear was worse than regret. Then he nodded once. Joshua looked at him, then at me. "Let's do it," they both said. That was the moment I would regret for the rest of my life. We waited until Joshua's parents were asleep. The house settled into that quiet nighttime hum. Pipes shifting, the refrigerator kicking on, the soft sound of distant cars. We got dressed, grabbed flashlights, and climbed out Joshua's bedroom window. We dropped into the bushes below, branches snapping and scratching our arms. None of us laughed. None of us whispered jokes. We moved fast, cutting through backyards and hopping fences like we'd done 100 times as kids. Except this time, we weren't sneaking out for fun. We were sneaking out because something felt wrong and no adult seemed willing to say it out loud. We reached Wicked Lane, and the Dreadmore house waited at the end of the street. It looked bigger at night. Not physically bigger, but heavier, like it took up more space in your mind. The porch leaned forward. The boarded windows looked like closed eyes. The front yard was dead and uneven, patches of weeds and dirt. Even the air around it felt different, cooler and still, like the house had its own weather. We stopped at the edge of the yard and just stared. "Maybe this wasn't the best idea," Damon whispered. "We should head back." Joshua shook his head. "No," he said. "We're going in. We're finding Nick and his mom." "But what if they're dead?" Damon asked, and for the first time his voice sounded small. Joshua swallowed hard. "Then at least we'll know," he said. "And we'll tell the police where to find them." He stepped onto the porch first. The wood creaked under him like it was complaining. We followed. The front door was slightly open already, not wide, just cracked, as if someone had pulled it shut, but not enough for the latch to catch. Joshua pushed it, and it creaked open wider. Inside was darkness so thick our flashlights looked weak at first. Then the beam steadied, and we stepped into a living room that felt like it was stuck decades in the past. Old furniture from the 50s or 60s, a couch with stiff fabric, a coffee table that looked like it belonged in a museum. Dust on every surface, thick enough to dull the light. Cobwebs in the corners. The air smelled like old wood, mildew, and something stale beneath it, like the house had been holding its breath for years. My flashlight drifted upward and stopped on a large portrait above the fireplace. In the painting was a family of 5, a mother, a father, and 3 children. Their clothes looked old-fashioned. The mother's hair was styled perfectly. The father looked stern. The children looked too well behaved. Something about their eyes made my skin crawl. As I stared, I realized why. They didn't look painted. They looked aware. "This has to be the Dreadmores," I said. Joshua nodded. "You remember the story, right?" I told him to say it again anyway, because I needed to hear it out loud, like naming it would make it less powerful. Joshua said the family moved in decades ago because they got the house for almost nothing. A deal that was too good to be true. A real estate agent promised them it was a steal, a gift, a lucky break. For a while, everything seemed fine. Then the youngest daughter, Rebecca, started talking about the red door. Upstairs, at the end of a long hallway, was a single door painted red. No one could open it. The agent claimed it was storage, but whispers came from behind it. Scratching. Sounds like something moving. The family started seeing things, hearing voices, getting paranoid. Then one night, they left everything and vanished. Joshua finished the story just as something shuffled above us. We froze. Flashlights held tight. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't a stomp. It was a slow drag, like something being moved across a floor. Slowly, we moved toward the staircase. Every step creaked so badly, it felt like the house was announcing our presence. Halfway up, I wanted to turn back, but Joshua kept going. And I kept going, because the fear of being the one who quit felt almost as strong as the fear of what was upstairs. At the top, we turned left. There it was, the red door. It was at the end of a hallway that seemed too long for the size of the house. The paint looked old, but still red, a deep color that caught the flashlight beam and held it. The doorknob looked darker than it should have, like it had been touched too many times. "Nick and his mom have to be behind that door," Damon whispered. None of us answered. We just started walking down the hall, each step feeling heavier than the last. Then we smelled smoke. It hit suddenly, sharp and bitter, like something burning fast. My chest tightened, and I turned toward the railing at the top of the stairs. The downstairs was on fire. Flames climbed the walls, orange and loud, roaring upward like the house had been waiting for this. Heat rushed up the stairwell. The air changed instantly, choking and hot. Panic took us like a wave. We ran to doors along the hallway, yanking handles, screaming, trying to find a way out. Every door was locked. Every knob refused to turn. The fire grew brighter, climbing the stairs, filling the space with heat. Then the red door creaked open. It didn't swing wide. It opened just enough. We didn't hesitate. Joshua sprinted through. Damon followed. I was right behind them, and then the door slammed shut in my face so hard my ears rang. I stumbled back, grabbing at the knob, but it wouldn't move. I pounded on the wood with both hands, shouting their names. When the ringing in my ears faded, I realized something else. The heat was gone. I turned around. The fire was gone too. No flames, no smoke, no heat. Just the same dark, dusty house. The stairs were untouched. The air was cold again. The hallway was silent, except for my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. I ran to the railing and looked down. The living room was the same as before, frozen and dusty. No fire, no damage, nothing. Joshua and Damon were gone. I went back to the red door and yanked the knob until my hands hurt. I kicked it. I slammed my shoulder into it. I pounded until my knuckles swelled and my throat went raw from screaming. Nothing. Eventually, all I could do was sit on the floor and cry, breathless and shaking, staring at a door that felt like a wall in the world. When I finally got out of that house, I don't even remember how. I remember running. I remember streetlights. I remember vomiting in someone's yard. I remember my parents' faces when police showed up, their shock turning quickly into anger, as if anger could undo what happened. The police searched the Dreadmore house from top to bottom after I told them everything. They brought in more officers. They brought dogs. They took it seriously enough to make me feel momentarily hopeful. Then they told me what they found. They said they never found a red door. They questioned me for hours, going over the same details again and again. Where was it? What color was it? How far down the hall? Did I touch it? Did I smell smoke? Did I use drugs? Did I drink? Was I trying to cover up something else? They kept circling around the idea that I'd made it up, or hallucinated it, or that my friends had run away somewhere, and I didn't want to admit it. But Joshua and Damon didn't come home, and nobody ever found Nick. They never found his mom, either. Months passed, then more months. Life kept moving the way it always does, even when you feel like time should stop out of respect. School continued. People stopped asking questions out loud. The missing person flyers faded and curled at the edges until they were removed or torn down. New stories replaced old ones, but I stayed stuck. Sometimes late at night, I feel the urge to set up my telescope again and aim it at the Dreadmore house. I tell myself it's a bad idea. I tell myself it will only make things worse. I tell myself my mind is looking for patterns that aren't there because I can't live with not knowing. But every time I look, I swear I see the same thing. Two small figures standing in the far left window on the second floor, where there shouldn't even be an open window. Watching me, not waving, not moving, just standing there like they've been waiting for me to look back. So if you take anything from this, take this part seriously, because I didn't. Never go inside anywhere you have no business being. Not abandoned houses, not empty buildings, not places people warn you about, like it's a joke. Some doors aren't just doors, and some stories don't stay stories once you step over the line. Story 5. It was 4 a.m., that strange gray hour where the world doesn't feel like it belongs to anyone yet. Not night anymore, but not morning either. Just a thin, hollow in-between, where streetlights still glow, even though the sky is starting to lighten, and every familiar shape looks slightly wrong at the edges. The air outside had that smell it gets after a late-night drizzle. Wet asphalt, damp grass, and something cold and metallic that always reminds me of winter, even though we don't really get winters like that here. The chill didn't just hit my skin. It settled deeper, into my bones, like the day itself was starting with a warning. We were leaving early for a long drive. My dad insisted on it every time. Beat traffic, get on the road before the sun comes up. Stop once for coffee, once for gas, and keep moving. He didn't like delays. He didn't like wasting time. He said the road belonged to the people who got up first. I stepped onto the porch and saw them in the driveway under the yellow porch light. My dad was at the trunk with that heavy, focused silence he always carried before a trip. He didn't talk much when he was loading the car. He just worked, moving bags with a kind of mechanical precision, like the trunk wasn't a trunk, but a puzzle he needed to solve perfectly. My mom stood near the passenger door with her arms crossed tight over her chest, shoulders raised against the cold. She was whispering reminders to him. Don't forget the smaller bags on the steps. Make sure the cooler is on top. Don't crush the toiletries. She always sounded softer at that hour, like she didn't want to wake the neighbors. But she still had that edge of determination, the tone that said she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. My brother leaned against the rear door, half asleep, face lit by the pale blue glow of his phone. He scrolled without really looking, thumb moving on reflex, his hair stuck up in the back. He had on the hoodie he wore to bed. He looked like he'd been dragged outside and never fully entered the moment. It was normal. So normal that it made me relax without realizing I was tense. It was just a family getting ready for a trip. Dad stacking bags, Mom double-checking everything, my brother barely awake, me stepping in to help because I knew my dad would get annoyed if I didn't. I carried a suitcase to the trunk. The fabric was rough against my palms, and the zipper pull was cold. When I lifted it, I felt that familiar strain in my wrist, the weight shifting and tugging. My dad took it from me without a word and slid it into place like he'd measured the space in his head already. I helped with 2 more bags, then reached for my backpack and felt the empty spot in my side pocket where my charger should have been. My stomach dropped in that small, irritating way it does when you realize you forgot something important at the last second. "Wait," I said, half to myself. I forgot my charger. My mom made a tired sound, not angry, just resigned. My dad didn't even look up. He just said, "Make it quick." I jogged back inside. The front door creaked as it shut behind me, and the sound echoed too loudly in the quiet house. Inside was pitch black. The darkness felt thick, like the air was heavier indoors than outdoors. It should have felt familiar. My house, my hallway, my stairs. But when you come in from outside at that hour, everything looks like a stranger's home. Until your eyes adjust. And then I noticed the TV. The living room TV was on. Not loud, no show, no voices. Just a flickering blue light that spilled into the hallway like water. It made the shadows of the furniture stretch and bend. The coat rack by the door looked too tall. The corner of the couch looked like a hunched shape. The flicker made everything twitch at the edge of my vision, and my brain kept trying to turn ordinary objects into movement. We never left the TV on like that. My dad hated wasting electricity. My mom always made sure everything was off before we left, and I'd been outside with them. I'd seen them. I'd spoken. Nobody had come back in. Still, the TV was on, filling the hallway with that cold blue pulse. I didn't stop. I told myself maybe someone had turned it on earlier and forgotten. Maybe my brother had come back in and left it. Maybe it was on a timer. Nothing about it made sense. But in the moment, I was still in hurry-up mode. And when you're rushing, you accept things you'd question later. I moved toward the stairs, keeping my eyes forward. Then I saw them. My dad in his recliner. My brother sprawled on the couch. My mom in her usual seat, hands folded in her lap. All of them facing the TV. The screen wasn't playing a show. It was static. Not loud snow, but that dense, rolling static pattern like an old channel with no signal. The blue light from it washed their faces in a sickly glow. They looked normal at first. Same clothes, same shapes, same postures. But none of them looked at me. Not even my brother, who would normally glance up if I came in, even if he didn't speak. Not even my mom, who had a habit of checking on where everyone was, especially when we were in a rush. Not even my dad, who would at least grunt something if I walked through the room. They didn't react at all. No head turn. No blink. No shift of weight. They sat there like mannequins posed in the exact places they always sat. A cold thought tried to rise up in me, but I pushed it down. I was in a hurry, and I didn't want to get caught up in weirdness. I told myself they were just tired and zoning out. Maybe I'd misread what I saw outside. Maybe they'd come back in while I carried bags and I didn't notice. That didn't make sense. But my brain kept trying to patch the hole with anything it could. I walked past them toward the stairs, pretending I wasn't unsettled, pretending that walking quickly would make the feeling go away. As I passed the living room, I realized something else that made my skin tighten. The room didn't feel right. It felt late. Not late like the time, late like the moment. Like the room was a beat behind reality, as if it was copying what a living room should be, and lagging slightly. Like the air noticed me only after I had already moved on. The flicker from the TV seemed slower than it should have been, like the light wasn't matching the rhythm of the static. I reached the stairs and took them two at a time. The carpet muffled my steps, but I could still feel the old wood underneath. I went straight to my room, still thinking only about the charger. I crossed the threshold, reached for the nightstand, and then the realization hit me so hard it felt like a physical blow. I just saw them outside, all of them, in the driveway, under the porch light, loading bags, my dad at the trunk, my mom by the door, my brother on his phone. I had helped them. I had felt the wet metal of the trunk rim under my fingers. I had heard my mom whispering. I had heard my dad tell me to hurry. I had watched my brother lean against the car. That memory was fresh, solid, undeniable. So there was no way they were also downstairs. No way. My hand froze above the charger. My chest tightened. My heart started hammering, like it was trying to break its way out of my ribs. For a second, I couldn't move at all. I stood there in the dark, with my fingers hovering, as if touching the charger would confirm something I wasn't ready to know. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't a normal soft buzz. It felt sharp and aggressive, like an electric shock. I pulled it out with shaking fingers and saw a message from my dad. "Where are you? Why are you late?" I stared at it, the words swimming. My eyes flicked up automatically to the top of the screen. No service. The icon was clear. No bars. No Wi-Fi. Nothing. But the message was right there. It had arrived anyway. The cold in my bones deepened into something else. Not just fear. Confusion so sharp it felt like nausea. My mind tried to build a logical explanation. Maybe the message came in earlier and only displayed now. Maybe the phone was lying about signal. Maybe I knew how it behaved when it had no service. It didn't suddenly receive texts. Not like that. I held my breath and slowly turned my head toward the open bedroom door. The hallway outside my room was dark, but the flickering blue TV light from downstairs reached the ceiling in faint pulses, like a heartbeat. The light moved in a steady rhythm, and with each flicker I felt like the house was watching me back. Then I heard it. "Son?" My dad's voice. From downstairs. Perfect. Exact. The same weary impatience, the same tone he used when he didn't want to repeat himself. "Bring me some water." I didn't move. My body felt locked, like every muscle had decided to stop cooperating. My skin prickled with goosebumps. My mouth went dry, because that voice didn't belong downstairs. That voice belonged outside, in the driveway, in the dark, in the real moment I had just left. And something else finally clicked, something I hadn't let myself focus on when I walked past the living room. When I passed them, none of them had moved. not even slightly, and none of them had blinked. That detail hit my mind like a bright flash. I could see it clearly now. Their eyes were open too wide, fixed on the static. Their faces were pale in that blue light, too smooth, almost waxy, like a mask stretched tight over bone, like the idea of a face more than a real one. I stepped backward into my room as quietly as I could. My hand found the door and eased it shut without letting it click. Then I turned the lock. The click sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I stood there, holding my breath, waiting for a reaction, waiting for someone to yell my name, waiting for my dad outside to pound on the door and ask what I was doing, waiting for anything that would make this situation snap back into normal. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, a slow creak rose from the bottom of the stairs. Not footsteps. Weight. A heavy, patient pressure on wood. Like something was learning how stairs work for the first time. Like it didn't have the rhythm of a human walking. It was too slow, too deliberate. Creak, pause, creak, closer. Each sound was spaced out, as if whatever was moving didn't need to rush. It knew I couldn't go anywhere. I pressed my back against my bedroom door, phone clenched in my hand, so tightly my fingers hurt. "I'm thirsty," the voice said again, but it was different now. Still my dad's voice, but flatter. The impatience was there, but the warmth underneath it, the human part, was missing. The sound was right outside my door. I stared at the thin strip of light under the door, expecting to see shoes, a shadow of legs, something grounded. There were no feet, no shoes, no pant legs. Just a wide block of darkness pressed up against the bottom of the door, covering the light completely. Not a shadow cast from above, a presence right there, low and close, like something had crouched down, or melted downward, or spread itself out. Then came 3 knocks. Not on the door, on the wall, right next to my bed, right where my head would be if I were lying down. The sound was soft but solid, like knuckles on drywall, like someone testing where I slept. The water, son. My blood went cold. I couldn't make myself breathe. I couldn't make myself move toward the window. I couldn't make myself do anything except listen. My mind screamed at me to call my mom, to call my dad, to call anyone. But my phone still showed no service, and even if it did, who would believe me? What would I even say? There's something outside my door that sounds like my dad, but it's knocking beside my bed. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Then it vibrated again. Another text from my dad. "Forget the charger. We're leaving. Get out here now or you're staying behind." I stared at the message, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The words didn't just scare me. They triggered something deeper, something old, like a childhood fear of being forgotten or left behind. My dad had always been strict about leaving on time. He'd always said, "If you're not in the car when we go without you." He said it like a joke, but it never felt like a joke when you were a kid. And now, in the worst moment possible, that exact threat was on my screen. Before I could even process it, the voice outside my room spoke again. Same voice, same impatient tone. "Forget the charger. We're leaving. Get out here now, or you're staying behind." It said the words a second before my phone buzzed with the text. Word for word. My whole body went numb with the realization. It wasn't just copying my dad's voice. It was copying the future. It knew what my phone was about to show me. It knew what would be said before it was said. Like it wasn't guessing, like it wasn't listening. like it was reading from a script written ahead of time. I couldn't think. My thoughts scattered. All I could feel was panic and the desperate urge to survive. But I had no clear path. If I opened the door, I didn't believe I'd be facing my father. If I stayed in my room, my real family might leave without me. And if they left, I would be alone in this house with whatever was outside my door. Outside, through my window, I heard the muffled roar of the car engine starting up in the driveway. My real family, leaving. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. The sound of the engine was proof the driveway scene was real. Proof that I wasn't imagining the packing, the bags, the cold metal trunk. Proof that my dad outside was actually my dad. And whatever was here, in the house, knew it too. It didn't need to break in. It didn't need to force the door. It just needed to make me choose wrong. The darkness under my door shifted slightly, not like a person adjusting their stance, but like a shape changing. The air near the floor seemed to thicken, and I could smell something faint and sour, like damp cloth left too long in a basement. My phone buzzed again, a repeat message from my dad outside, more urgent this time, but I couldn't even focus on the words anymore because my ears were fixed on the silence behind my bedroom door. That's when the thing spoke again, but not with my dad's voice this time. It whispered, softer, closer, and the sound of it made my skin crawl because it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside my room. We've been waiting for you. The words didn't come from the door. They didn't come from the wall. They came from under my bed. I stared at the space beneath it, at the dark gap where dust collects and things disappear. My bed sat low enough that you couldn't see far under it unless you got down on the floor. It was just a strip of darkness, nothing more. But in that moment, that strip felt endless, like it wasn't the space under a bed anymore, like it was a mouth. The engine outside revved again, louder, and I heard a car door slam. My dad's voice, real this time, faint through the window, calling my name, impatient, like he was already halfway done with me. And under the bed, something shifted, slow and heavy, pressing against the floorboards with that same weight I had heard on the stairs. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I held my phone up like it could protect me, like a screen could be a shield. In the driveway, the car began to roll, tires whispering over wet pavement, and the whisper under my bed came again, closer than any voice should be, like it was right beside my ear, even though I hadn't moved. Come on, it said, not in my dad's voice, not in any familiar voice, but in something that sounded like the shape of a voice learning how to talk. They'll leave you, Oz. Then, softer, almost pleased, or you can stay. Story 6. It was 4 a.m., that strange gray hour where everything feels slightly off. Not night, not morning, just that hollow stretch of time where the world is quiet in a way that doesn't feel natural, like the usual rules are still sleeping. Outside, the air smelled like wet asphalt. It had rained earlier, not hard, just enough to leave the driveway dark and shiny. The cold had teeth, the kind that bites at your ears and fingers, even if you're wearing a hoodie. That pre-dawn chill always felt heavier than normal cold, like it wasn't just temperature, like it was something settling into the neighborhood. We were leaving early for a trip, one of those long drives my dad insists on starting before sunrise. He always said it was the only way to beat the idiots on the road. When he got into that mode, there was no arguing with him. If he said we were leaving at 4, that meant the car was packed at 3:45 and the engine was turning over at 4 o'clock. No excuses. I stepped onto the porch and saw my dad, my mom, and my brother, already outside by the trunk. The porch light was that old yellow color that makes everything look older and rougher than it really is. It cast long, shaky shadows across the driveway, stretching behind the car until the car looked like a dark, crouched animal waiting to spring. My dad was stacking bags with the same focused silence he always had before a drive. He didn't look up. He didn't ask where I'd been. He moved with a mechanical precision, like there was a perfect way the luggage had to fit, and he could see it in his head. He'd lift a suitcase, shift it an inch, press it down, then take the next one, building it like a wall. My mom stood near the passenger door with her arms crossed tight against the cold. She leaned in to whisper reminders, like she didn't want the neighbors to hear us leaving in the dark. Don't forget the smaller bags on the steps. Don't crush the cooler. Make sure the snack bag stays on top. Her voice was quiet, but her tone had that familiar edge, the one that meant she was stressed even if she was trying not to show it. My brother leaned against the rear door, half asleep, his face lit by the pale blue glow of his phone. He looked like he wasn't fully present, like someone had dragged him out of bed and his brain hadn't caught up. He barely blinked. He scrolled, thumb moving out of habit. Normal. Completely normal. I went down the porch steps and helped without being asked. I grabbed a duffel bag and felt the rough fabric under my palms. Another suitcase had a cold, damp handle that left moisture on my fingers. When I leaned toward the trunk, the rim of the metal felt wet and cold, and the wind hit the back of my neck like a slap. Everything felt real, solid, grounded. That's why what happened next messed with me so badly. Because there was nothing dreamy or hazy about that moment. I was awake. I was outside. I was touching things. I was hearing my mom's voice and the distant hum of the highway and the soft clunk of bags being stacked. I set one of the smaller bags inside the trunk and suddenly remembered my phone charger. I'd been using it the night before, and I knew I'd left it on my nightstand. If I didn't bring it, my phone would be dead by midday, and on a long drive, my phone is basically my lifeline. Music, maps, messages. I forgot my charger, I said, already turning back toward the house. My mom made a tired sound, not angry, but annoyed. My dad didn't even look at me. Hurry up, he said in that flat voice that meant he wasn't in the mood for extra trips. I jogged back up the steps and went inside. The front door creaked behind me, and the sound seemed too loud in the early morning quiet. The inside of the house was pitch black, a jarring contrast to the porch light. It took my eyes a second to adjust. Then I noticed the TV in the living room. It was on. Not a show, not a movie, not even a commercial. Just a rhythmic, flickering blue light filling the room. The light spilled into the hallway and made the shadows stretch and twitch. The coat stand looked too tall, like a person standing still. The edge of the couch looked like a hunched back. The flicker made the furniture seem like it was breathing. We never left the TV on like that. My dad hated wasting power. My mom was the kind of person who double-checked lights before leaving. And I had been outside with them. They were out there right now. So why was the TV on? I didn't stop to think about it properly. That was my mistake. I was still in rush mode, and when you're rushing, you ignore things that would normally make you pause. I walked past the living room, and that's when I saw them. My family was sitting there, my dad in his favorite recliner, my brother sprawled on the couch exactly the way he always did, my mom in her usual seat, posture straight, even when she was supposedly relaxing. All three of them facing the TV. Everything looked normal at first glance. Same clothes, same shapes, same familiar scene, like I'd walked into the room on any random evening. but none of them looked at me. They didn't turn their heads. They didn't react to the sound of my footsteps. My brother didn't even lift his eyes from the screen. My mom didn't ask what I was doing up. My dad didn't grunt or tell me to keep the noise down. There was no sign that I existed in that room. I didn't stop. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to wake them or start a conversation that would delay us. I moved through the hallway toward the stairs, telling myself they were just zoning out, that it was early, that they were tired. I told myself the TV must have been left on somehow, and they'd come inside without me noticing. But something felt off as I passed them. Not wrong in a way I could explain, just late. Like the room was a second behind the rest of the house. Like it noticed me after I'd already moved past it. The air felt heavier near the living room, thicker and stale, like it hadn't been breathed in a long time. I climbed the stairs, quick and quiet, and pushed into my room. My hand went toward the nightstand, reaching for the charger. And then the realization hit me. Not slowly, not as a creeping suspicion. It hit like a cold wave that went through my spine and locked my muscles. I had just seen them outside, in the driveway, under the porch light, my dad at the trunk, my mom by the passenger door, my brother on his phone. I had helped them with the bags. I had felt the cold, wet metal of the trunk. I had heard my dad tell me to hurry. I had watched my mom whisper reminders. There was no time gap. I had only been inside for seconds. There was no way they could have come in that fast. No way I could have missed 3 people walking past me in a narrow hallway. No way my brother would have sprinted inside and somehow ended up sprawled on the couch in the exact position he always used. My hand tightened on the bedroom door handle. My chest started pounding. My heart felt like a trapped bird slamming against my ribs. I stood frozen in the dark, with the charger still untouched, my fingers hovering as if I'd forgotten what I came for. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't the gentle buzz of a normal text. It felt sharp, aggressive, like a jolt of electricity. My stomach dropped. I pulled it out and saw a message from my dad. "Where are you? Why are you late?" For a second, that should have calmed me down. That message meant my dad was outside. That message meant the driveway scene was real. But then I looked at the top of the screen. No service, no bars, no Wi-Fi. The icon was clear. The phone was dead to the world. But the message was there anyway, sitting on the screen like it had arrived through the air itself. My breath hitched. I stared at it too long, hoping it would disappear, hoping it was just a delayed message that came in before my phone lost signal. Except my dad wouldn't be texting me from 5 feet away. He'd yell. He'd bang on the door. He'd call my name like he always did. I slowly turned toward my open bedroom door, looking out into the dark hallway. The blue light from the TV still flickered downstairs, sending pulses across the ceiling like a slow heartbeat. The house felt too quiet, like it was waiting. Then I heard it. "Son?" My dad's voice. Perfect. Exactly like him. Same weary impatience, the same tone he used when he wanted something and didn't want to ask twice. "Bring me some water." I didn't move. I couldn't, because a detail I'd pushed aside earlier finally snapped into focus. When I walked past them in the living room, none of them had moved, not even a little, and none of them had blinked. That wasn't something I'd noticed in the moment, because my mind had been rushing. But now I could see it clearly in memory, like my brain had saved the image and was replaying it for me in slow motion. Their faces under that flickering blue light looked wrong, pale, smooth, waxy, like skin stretched tight over something that wasn't quite human. Their eyes were too wide, too still, and they didn't reflect light the way eyes should. They were staring at a screen of static, like it was the most important thing in the world. I stepped backward into my room, as quietly as I could, my heel catching the carpet. I eased the door shut without letting it click. Then I locked it. The click sounded like a gunshot in the silence. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. I stood there, back pressed to the door, trying to listen without making noise, trying to breathe without sounding like I was panicking. Silence. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing happened. No voice, no footsteps, no banging on the door. Then, a slow creak. It came from the bottom of the stairs. It wasn't the sound of footsteps, not the quick, familiar rhythm of a person walking upstairs. It was weight, heavy, deliberate weight, pressing down on the wood like something was testing how much it could hold, like something was learning how to move in a body. Creak. Pause. Creak. The sound traveled upward, rung by rung, and with each one my mouth went drier. My whole body went tense. I held my phone tight, staring at the screen as if it could tell me what to do. The creaking got closer. "I'm thirsty," the voice said again, and now it sounded like it was right outside my door. I stared at the thin strip of light underneath the door, expecting to see shadows of shoes, expecting to see my dad's feet, expecting anything normal. There were no feet. Instead, the light was blocked by something wide and dark, pressed against the bottom of the door. Not a shadow cast from standing upright. Something low and broad, like a shape crouched on the floor or spread out across it. Then there were 3 knocks, not on the door, on the wall, right next to my bed, right where my head would be if I were lying down. The knocks were slow and careful, like someone marking a spot. The water, sun. I stopped breathing. I tried to become invisible in my own room, like the way kids do when they hide under blankets, believing that not being seen means not being found. My phone vibrated again. Another message from my dad outside. "Forget the charger. We're leaving. Get out here now, or you're staying behind." I stared at the text and felt a cold wash of panic that had nothing to do with the thing outside my door. It hit some older part of me, the part that still remembered being a kid and being scared of getting left behind. My dad had always said it like a threat, half joking, half serious. "If you're not in the car, we're leaving without you." Before I could even react, the voice outside my room spoke again. Same voice, same impatient tone. "Forget the charger. We're leaving. Get out here now, or you're staying behind." It said the words a second before my phone buzzed with the text. Word for word. I froze. That wasn't just imitation. That wasn't just copying my dad. That was something else entirely. It was like it knew what my phone was about to receive, like it was reading ahead, like it could pull the next moment out of the air and use it against me. And then I heard it. Outside, through the house, faint but real, came the muffled roar of the car engine starting in the driveway. My real family was leaving. That sound should have been a relief. Proof. Confirmation. They were outside. They were real. They were going without me. But it didn't feel like relief. It felt like a trap, snapping shut. Because now I had a choice, and both options felt wrong. If I stayed in my room, my family would leave me behind, and I'd be alone in this house with whatever was outside my door. If I opened the door and ran downstairs, I didn't believe I'd be running toward my family. I'd be running toward something wearing their voices, like a mask. I stood there shaking, trying to think, trying to find a third option. Something smart, something safe. My brain kept shouting, call them, call your dad, call your mom, but my phone still showed no service. And even if I could call, what would I say without sounding insane? The darkness under my door shifted slightly, not like someone adjusting their feet, more like a thick shape pulling itself closer, pressing against the wood. The blocked strip of light didn't return. Then the voice came again, but softer, and this time it didn't come from the hallway. We've been waiting for you. The sound wasn't at the door. It wasn't on the stairs. It was inside my room, under my bed. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I stared at the gap beneath the bed frame, that strip of shadow where dust gathers and old socks vanish. My bed was low enough that you couldn't see far under it unless you got down on the floor. But in that moment, it didn't feel like the space under furniture. It felt like a mouth, like a hole that didn't belong to my room at all. The engine outside revved again. I heard a door slam, a voice, faint through the walls, my dad calling my name with irritation and urgency. Real, normal, human. And under my bed, something shifted with that same heavy pressure I'd heard on the stairs. Wood creaking softly, as if it was being pressed from below. I backed away until I hit the wall. My phone felt slick in my hand from sweat. My breathing was shallow and quiet, like I could hide in my own lungs. The whisper came again, closer than it should have been, like it was right beside my ear. They'll leave you. The words weren't in my dad's voice now. They weren't in my mom's voice, or my brother's. They sounded like something trying on speech, shaping syllables carefully, learning what fear tastes like when you feed it to someone. Outside, the car began to roll, tires whispering over wet pavement. And the thing under my bed didn't sound angry. It sounded patient, like it had all the time in the world, and I was the one who had to choose.